What's up, goats? Welcome to season 2 of Startup Hype Man's Goat to Market show. I'm your host, Startup Hype Man founder and chief pitch artist, and of course I go by the name RajNATION. This season we've got a special treat for you. If you haven't already heard, I officially dropped the album Goat to Market, the first ever hip hop album about you, founders, and about the life, startup life. Goat to Market is an 8-song concept album telling the story of a founder's journey from idea to capital raise. It's a story of struggle to success, getting up after being knocked down, breaking down in order to break out, and dealing with the doubt, distractions, and detours en route to dominating and becoming, well, the GOAT. Now, a lot went into making this album, from the initial concepting, to the beat making, to the lyricism, to the overall storytelling, and someone who was instrumental in bringing it together was a man by the name Pablo Gonzalez. Pablo is the founder of Be The Stage, a company that specializes in creating digital word of mouth via streaming podcasts, interactive trade show booths to run podcasts live off the trade show floor, online content, and so much more. And Pablo has become a good friend of mine over the last couple of years, and I decided to make him the creative director for the album. So think of his role almost as my creativity consultant, helping me get out of my head, helping me figure out the album's story arc, working with our producer. He even makes an appearance on one of the tracks. For this season of the GTM Show, instead of me interviewing other guests, I'm actually the one being interviewed by Pablo. We talk about the album, the concepts and themes, the behind the lyrics, you know the deal. Listen, I put my heart and soul into this album, and this is my way of letting you inside my head. Haven't heard the album yet? Goat to Market is streaming everywhere. So if you're on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, Tidal, or any other random network, just search Goat to Market or RajNATION and get ready to be taken on a musical journey. And if you want to chat with me directly about the album or about anything you're going through with your startup, whether that's pitching, figuring out your go-to-market strategy, or something else, remember, I'm just a DM away if you join our online founder community, the Goat to Market Club, at startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. Without further ado, I give you season 2 of the GTM Show, appropriately titled Making the GOAT. The opening lyrics for I Get Around are, "Wipe the dust off my pitch deck. This is my commitment to the day I'm seeing big checks." I had those 4 bars figured out 2 or 3 months before we ever put this song into action. And I remember back in April of 2022, I did this speaking engagement at DePaul University, my alma mater. And just the group that was putting it, after my talk was done, they were like, "Oh, can we do a quick video for social media?" I was like, yeah, no problem. And they were like, "Oh, just, talk about like what this event meant for you. And, maybe drop a rap if you want as well." And so that was the first time I ever out loud spoke those words. I had those lyrics in my head for a few months. And in that video, which is probably sitting on whatever DePaul clubs, probably on their Instagram, is those first 4 bars. So it's weird because this is the second to last song on the album, but it's the first song we did because the whole album is really built around this song, because this is where it started at. And so I knew this is how it had to start. And if this is how it was going to start, it needed to feel like almost like this anthem. Yeah. Kind of in the way like you take like Till I Collapse by Eminem is like an anthem, right? This doesn't have the hook. This doesn't have the structure of the 3-bar, the verse, hook, verse, hook, verse, hook 3 times over. But it has that feel of like, whoa, this is like, I'm feeling this in my bones.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you had the opening to this song already thought out before. Because to me, when you and I started talking about the mixtape, this song to me is also the one that I had the most thought out, right? Like I as we talked about the arc of the story, there was going to be this like roadshow to getting your funding, kind of like crescendo of tense moments that, like you said, with the anthem, for me, it was Biggie's Victory, right? Like I remember rolling around with Victory in my car and just like having this whole like, dude, I'm ready to go fight anybody. Right.
Yeah.
And the idea of this like crescendo with some kind of, I don't know what's in the background. Like it's like the cello or whatever it is, right? Some kind of like kind of classical crescendo going on in the background with a rising tension, with a break in the middle, and then going back and finishing strong was like the one thing that I had in mind. So it is interesting. You put this out first. To me, it was a big kind of like validating point of when you first put this thing out, working on the first beat, we had to have a win, have like a song that we both really, really liked, really propel this thing forward in a very motivating way, man. I thought you nailed it, dude. And then the next lyric is my favorite lyric in the song because, as you know, I'm obsessed with category design, and I echo with how you're like, be the only, right? And when you're like,
I'm in step, give a fuck about the competition on another planet made up of another composition. It's a high position with a view that you don't see.
Right, a POV.
Are we the best, motherfucker? We the only.
When you started it with that, and I'm like, oh my God, now he's talking category design language. And he's hitting on that stuff. Was that? It feels like you were incorporating language that you generally use in Startup Hype Man, the POV and being the only and stuff like that, right?
That's so right. It's like a little like nod and a wink that I slipped in Startup Hype Man's point of company POV, right? Which is don't be the best, be the only.
Yeah.
And so that's what's just like casually thrown in there, but you know, it's in step and it's in rhyme and everything like that. But yeah, that what you're saying there is spot on with it. And I think it's how you feel, especially as if you're in that pursuit to raise capital, you constantly get the question of like, what about this company who's doing something similar? What about this company? What about this competitor? And you're just like, motherfucker, we're the only ones out here. Stop talking about them. I don't care. I don't give a shit about them. We're here. Look at us. Focus on us. That's the kind of the idea there. And then, you know, the next lyrics from there, we go into,
you don't own me like every other crony. Specialist geneticist with money couldn't clone me.
That's another like evocation of no, only me or only we are the ones who are out here doing this, and quit trying to stake a claim on what we're doing.
Yeah. It hits deep into that whole like founder mentality of like, I can't work for somebody else. It's me, right? Like, I thought that was really cool. The next line I really liked was when you said,
but on the low key, 24/8, like a resurrected Kobe.
I was like, ooh,
that's everyone who has heard this song, who got the advanced listen, that's their favorite line. I love it too. I mean, I wish it didn't have to be a lyric, right? I wish he was still alive, but that was, I love that line came through. Because, you know, we all say it's like it's a 24/7 job as an entrepreneur, but really it's it's like you somehow figure out an 8th day in the week to run your company. And as we know, Kobe wore number 24 and 8. So it worked so well. And I'm so happy that like it hits too in the way it's delivered. From there, so the next set of bars, this is where it kind of gets into like that level of sophistication, right? So
the OG, you better get in this deal. The only cogs to watch is the one in this wheel.
COGS are cost of goods sold, COGs, right? COG. But it's look at how this comes together, right? The OG. So when I'm saying I'm the OG, it's the of goods of COG, of cost of goods sold.
And the original gangster, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Instead of original gangster, it's like, hey, I say original gangster, I'm like, I'm the like my cogs are lined up, right? And then we hit it's a triple rhyme or a triple entendre because cost of goods sold, but I use cogs as like a cog in a spoke in a machine, a cog in a wheel, right? So it's the only cogs to watch is the one in this wheel, meaning like I'm the hub and the wheel goes around me. And then from there,
it ain't smoke and mirrors, it's legit and it's real. On me, I return like the NFL.
Like you're going to pass on me, you're going to punt on my company, you're not going to invest in us. Well, guess what? I'm going to return like a punt returner does in the NFL. I'm going to return and come back in your face, but I'm also going to return, meaning return the fund, which is the term used in venture capital, right? We need to invest in a company that's going to give us such outsized return on our investment that they're going to return the entire fund that we've invested into this.
Yeah. First of all, I didn't realize that you were talking about cost of goods sold until I read it. and I saw that you had CO Cogs in all caps.
Yes.
Right. So I'm glad that we are discussing this right now, because I was going to go more into the NFL thing, right? Because that was obvious to me, multiple entendres. But like, if you don't see it in front of you, this idea of like the OG to the COGs to cog in a wheel, absolutely genius, man.
Well, this is like what a lot of this album has when we think about the overall theme, or like just listening to this from start to finish, not just this song, but the whole album.
Yeah.
And this is coming back to what we talked about in the intro episode, like about how this could have only been done now and not 5-6 years ago. Because if I did it 5-6 years ago, I would have been so intently focused on making it, how do I put it? Like hyper niche, in that only this small subset of people can and should listen to it. But what this brings is like, hey, I've got a niche audience, of the startup community. But the way the lyrics come through, the way the sounds of the songs are, is you can be nowhere near startups and you can nod your head and vibe. And if you want to extract this out of the lyrics, fine. I'm not going to sit here and be like, you must interpret it this way. I'm going to tell you how I interpret it and what I was going for. And I want you to know that for the sake of this podcast. But if you heard that and you didn't catch COGS, cost of goods sold, the first X times through, and maybe you never were gonna, that's also okay. Because I need and I want the casual listener who's not running a company, who's not working at a startup, who's a lawyer, who's a doctor, who's a whatever, to be able to just vibe with it, right? And catch up with enough of it.
Yeah. It goes even more into uniquely you, in the sense that there's a lot of that. There's also a lot of running, like sports, long form double entendres. We'll talk about in other songs, but
yeah,
the NFL one is great, right? Like the punt on me, I return like the NFL, right? Like a punt return, return on investments.
So let's talk it out and sort of how the quota rates are blowing up. We're on the score, quarterback, a purchase order more with water in a floor of cash. So even if we have a touchdown, it's a forward pass.
So it's like whole bunch of NFL football references, again matched up with business jargon. Yeah. It's phenomenal.
And it all makes sense too, right? Like we run the score a quarterback, meaning like we did great last business quarter, but a quarterback, right? The person who's helping run up the score with the team. A purchase ordered more would border in a floor of cash. All right. We got this big purchase order in. So now our floor is cash, not our ceiling. So even if we ever touch down, meaning even if we ever fall to the ground and hit our floor, it's a forward pass. We're still going to be advancing the ball forward and moving forward, which we know, touchdowns are often done by a forward pass, which one line earlier, we said quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So the quarterback threw a forward pass and scored a touchdown in this.
I love it, dude. I love it. And it's also the first time for me when the extra kind of like beat production of sound effects starts to really like jam with me, right? Like it talks about the forward pass, the touchdown, and there's like a in the background of a crowd. And I didn't see that coming at all, man. Like I remember hearing the first version of this beat and be like, yes, this is like Biggie's victory. This is good enough for me. But then you started adding in these other layer elements of like sound effects. How do you think about that when you are putting together songs, man?
It's a combination of what do I know I said in the lyrics combined with, based on what this song is going for, where do we need it to be more like, where do we need to have more fullness? You could do this whole song with just the instrumental and none of the extra sound effects, and I think it would still be good.
Yep.
But for something like this, that I was like, the vibe of the song needs to have that extra layer of production to it. I was looking at what are the elements where we need to make something felt a little bit more and like hit on the lyric. So that way it helps bring the whole thing together stronger. So it doesn't feel like empty, right? Versus what we were talking about with NXT, which is like, it doesn't need to be overproduced. We don't need to add sound effects. We need to add double time vocals or anything like that, because it's meant to be running thoughts in your head that are oftentimes incomplete. But this is like for like a culmination kind of song. This like it had to be brought home with that kind of vibe to it with adding in like the touchdown cheer there. And I think it just made sense to do it there because, right, touchdown is something that's celebrated, right? So you're going to hear fans cheer when a touchdown happens.
Mm-hmm.
So why in our, like, you'll never have a situation where there's a touchdown and no one cheers, whether it's at home or in the stadium. So why would our touchdown not have people cheering behind it? Mm-hmm. And then I think it was a nice little minor like Milla break before the next set of lyrics come up that change course and leave the football analogy behind.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think you walked a really fine line of adding those elements to speak to the feel me hip hop guys and also not overly producing it and not making it like cartoonishly too over the top, right? Like there's a lot in like what you don't say that I think helps a lot. I've got like one more lyric I want to get into, but is there another one in I Get Around that you really want to dive into?
The Taco Bell line.
Yeah, cool.
Right, so the bars go,
taking me to task and I'm brandishing a battle axe, but due diligence is feeling like a saddlebag. While you chilling shit, I'm reeling like a temper bass. Your mood killer is a deal, so I'ma have a glass. But I'm here to make a record deal. I'm tired of eating Taco Bell to save a buck on second meal. Chalupa stuff, but they're cheap enough to get them still. I want the guac without thinking about the extra grill.
So
good.
Right. Like, it's funny because like record deal, am I talking about a music deal or am I talking about making a record, like just business deal in general, like a historic business deal? Right.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm here to do this because I'm tired of eating Taco Bell, right? To save a buck on second meal sale. So on lunch, which is something that I think every entrepreneur has been through. And it's like, it's not just like Taco Bell. It's like, think about the times, in the first couple of years of running your business where like, you have that thought, you're like, well, if I eat a granola bar, or if I eat a protein bar at 11, I can actually skip lunch and save money on lunch. And then I'll have a couple of dollars more to eat dinner. Yeah. Right. These are all the things we've been through. So that's kind of what's being evoked there.
Yeah. Super relatable from that to like, can I make my buddy's bachelor party when I just need to like sit down and grind, right? Like it's a euphemism for like all of the sacrifices that you make. And the food analogy hits, right? Because everybody's done that one.
And on the bachelor party thing, it's like, not only can I make it because of time, but you're like calculating in what way could I, what if I fly in the morning of and I don't stay at the hotel and I fly out that same night, or like I stay at the hotel, but I stay one less night. So I save a little bit, right? All these things you do to try and just make it work, which you're also like, what's interesting is in those lyrics, what hits in the background is I go, man, fuck this shit. And you got to listen close, like on your headphones to hear that. But that's like when it happens over and over again, that's what you're thinking. And that's what happens. And that's the thought that you have. But then the way these lyrics close, this set of lyrics is chalupas suck, but they're cheap enough to get them still. I want the guac without thinking about the extra skrill. So skrill meaning, money. And this to me is probably the most important part of this set of bars, because I don't remember if I thought of this or maybe I heard it somewhere else years ago, but there is a moment in the founder entrepreneur journey where, and not everyone gets there, but for those who do, the switch flips to where, and it's more of like a Chipotle thing, I'd say, than a Taco Bell thing, where when you don't have a ton of money, you're in that line at Chipotle and you ask and you have the option, you get to the end of the line if you want to add guac. 99% of us always want to add the guac, but we hold off because we're like, it's $2.35 extra. So you convince yourself you don't need the guac, or you're fine, you can live without it, but you always want it. And I think, for the entrepreneurs who are able to succeed, it's like it's your guacamole moment where you can be in line at Chipotle and no longer think about the trade-off of the $2.35, where you're just like, I want the guac, I'm getting the guac. And that's kind of what I'm hitting on there is in this point, you're like, you want to be at that point of not having to think about the cost of the guac when you get your burrito.
You nailed it. It's that mindset switch. As somebody who has just very recently flipped that switch, like in the last couple of weeks, I'm like, you know what? I'm ordering these Jordans. It is a landmark moment of, I'm not counting every penny. You know, you start thinking about how much money you can save on a monthly basis, as opposed to like to invest later on, versus how much money you can save on a monthly basis in order to be able to live so that you're not going into debt. Right. Mm-hmm. Like it's that idea of like, it's great, man. I think you nailed it with the guac analogy is perfect, because it's the Chipotle trope of like guac is extra is such a perfect personification of like this small pleasure that you want to give yourself. But damn it, man, $1.50, you know?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, even when you technically can't afford it, is that $1.85, $2, you know, depending on where you are and depending on inflation, right? It changes. But like, you're probably fine in that moment if you get the guac, but you can't fundamentally like allow yourself to get the guac, because you know it's turning your burrito from $8.50 to $10.75 or whatever. Yeah. And that's just like, it messes with your psyche, because you're like, no, I can't spend $10.75 on a burrito. That's too much for a burrito.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you double digits for lunch. Even though you want it, you rationalize why you don't need it in that moment.
Yeah. Perfect, man. Well said. The part where the beat fades out and it stops and it goes back in, we use that trick twice in the album. It's like a personal favorite for me, right? Like there's many songs throughout history that I love that like stop and then we bring it back. How do you feel about that thing? How were you thinking about it when it came to this song?
So I've performed this like 4 or 5 times live at different keynotes up to this point. And every time I'll get to the end of that first verse and the beat will drop and everyone thinks the song is done and they're satisfied at that point. And so like they're applauding and I'll hold my hand up and be like, wait. And then the beat will drop and then we'll kick in and do that, you know, shortened second verse. But the idea is like, if you look at how the second verse comes out, right? We come out of the gates after the beat comes back in and it's
on the rebound off of a speed round. This is where I see sound. This is where I reach down. This is where I beat out. This is where I bleed out. This is where you freak out. Level up and peak out.
So it's the other side of like the verse 1 ends where you've raised it and verse 2 picks up with like, so what now? And that's, you know, on the rebound off of a seed round. This is where I see sound. And this is like, it's the overcoming of emotion. It's things that don't necessarily make sense if you think about like physics, right? This is where I see sound. No one can see sound, but you feel now that you can do these things and you feel this certain level of like, oh my God, we're here. We can do this. It's happening. Get out of my way, right? This is where I see sound. This is where I reach down. This is where I beat out. And then it's like, and it's kind of like that pointing the finger to everyone else who couldn't get there or like who doubted, where it's like, this is where you freak out. And this is where you freak out, level off and peak out. So it's like you who didn't believe in me or you who couldn't get to this point, this was your end game, or this was where you stopped, but this is where my story begins. And that's why, like, I think the second verse is really important because coming back to that idea of like, well, GTM 2 album, right? Well, it's really just, the story's really just beginning at this point. Yeah. Even though we've gotten to the goal, it's just kind of goal number 1. And then I think there's some other cool parts in the lyrics, right? Like,
if I play it safe with the bread, it's a safe round. Looking up the dough, so you better pull your bank out. Take out, I deliver any day now.
Which is oftentimes the first round that people raise is a safe note, which is simple agreement for future equity. And then we just got some wordplay with like cooking up the dough. You know, if I play it safe with the bread, it's a safe round. Cooking up the dough, right? Dough and bread. So you better pull your bank out, because we're talking about money. But then the next couple lyrics, like we continue the food analogy a little bit. If I play it safe with the bread, it's a safe round. Cooking up the dough, so you better pull your bank out. Takeout, right? Ordering it's takeout. I deliver any day now. Takeout delivery, right? But you're saying I'm gonna deliver on this promise. And And then, we got some fun lyrics to close it out from there. Hey, I hope you've been enjoying the conversation on Making the GOAT thus far. We still have a whole lot more to dive into on this song in this episode. But before we go any further, I want to just pause and let you know about a partner who was instrumental in helping bring the album to life, a partner who's been instrumental on this podcast and supporting it, and just who's been overall a huge supporter of Startup Hype Man's overall go-to-market platform. And that partner of ours is Akeva, and I want them to become your partner in software development. And if you do that, they're going to help you go from 0 to 1. Whether that's blockchain or no chain, Web3 or Web2, mobile apps or SaaS, Akeva builds it at startup speed and enterprise level refinement and class. That's why startups like Stride Health, Haveno, Olive Side, and so many more have trusted Akeva from their first dollar all the way up to their $1 billion valuation. And they're ready to help you become the GOAT to market. I've sent a bunch of startups Akeva's way. They've all been so grateful for the connection, and they have a killer offer for you. It's called a You Call It code review. What does that mean? Akeva will review the most critical parts of your code so you can see exactly what your tech needs to launch or scale. And they'll do this completely free, and then you call it from there. So you want to handle things on your own? You call it. Want to get Akeva's dev help? You call it. Want to take it somewhere else? You call it. It's an unbeatable offer, and like I said, they've been Startup Hype Man's partner in supporting the go-to-market platform. They even get a shout-out in one of the songs on the album, and I want them to become your partner in software development. Ready to see if you qualify for a You Call It code review? Well, just fill out the inquiry form on their website at akeva.io. That's akava.io, akeva.io, and tell them Startup Hype Man sent you. Back now to the conversation.
Yeah. I was gonna bring that last part up as my last lyric thing, because I love the whole bread, takeout, delivery, knocking on the door to knock off the hinges when you're delivering the food. Yeah. All of that. I also like the whole see how it shake out, stick it for a minute because I'm down with a bake out. So it's like shake and bake, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's cool. I love that you brought up the live element of the lull in the beat, right? Because I had never thought about that piece. It's got to be real interesting on a misdirection piece. You're a great performer. You understand crowds. You understand how deliver a punchline, and this idea that misdirection is kind of how you hook people into a joke or you hook people into a story is always really good. For me, it was just supremely singable, right? That's the first part that I started really singing as I listened to the second time. And the fact that the first part ends with just sign a check and let me get the biz, right? It's got this cool edge to it. And then that part, what you were just saying though, right? On the rebound off of a C round, this is where I see sound. This is where I reach out, right? That's the first part that really got me singing along to it. So I have this very sentimental feeling towards it, because it's the part that makes me feel cool in the car next to my wife, feeling like I'm rapping along.
That's intentional, right? Look at how the first verse starts versus how the second verse starts. Mm-hmm. The first, wipe the dust off my pitch deck. This is my commitment to the day I'm seeing big. There's a lot of flow there, right? And there's, I'd say probably more advanced lyricism and line construction. So if the song's going to drop and you think it's over, but then it comes back, it has to come back to where you can nod your head to the beat and also be there for the lyrics too. So if I came back in that verse too, and it was another sort of complex rhyme scheme, it doesn't hit as well. But if I come back and just on beat, on the rebound, off of a seed round, this is where I see sound, this is where I reach down, right?
Yeah.
It's it allows the second verse to make sense and play from just a music listening perspective, right? You're oh, I'm glad this song kept going and didn't finish 10 seconds earlier.
Yeah. It reminds I'm a huge Outkast fan. It reminds me of one of my favorite Outkast songs, which is the title song of Aquemini, where it's Big Boy drops a verse, there's a silence, and then Andre drops a verse. And Big Boy's verse is exactly what you said. It's very lyrical, right? It's got all these alliterations and all this different stuff. And then Andre's is my mind floats and bends, drop the win, count to 10, meet the twin, Andre Ben, welcome to the, right? Like it's the same exact play. And it got me like right into that moment of like
That's
moving
cool.
from like lyrical to quiet to just like this consonance and assonance that just completely hits. I thought you did it great, man. It was awesome.
I like that comparison.
Right? It's the best compliment I can give you. Anything else on this song, man?
There's a nice little wink as well towards the end where it's,
Family offices gotta watch what I say now. Sorry, sandbox, I'ma build my own playground.
this is a couple things going on here. One, so family offices, as we know, is like a vehicle to raise capital from. Sandbox is Sandbox Capital. So there's a wordplay there. Sorry, Sandbox, I'm gonna build my own playground. So Sandbox being, a famous venture capital firm. And you're
I
like,
thought you meant Sandbox, like the metaverse kind of platform, which I
like
thought
the
was
VR place.
Yeah, you building your own playground in the metaverse. So I guess
Let's say it was also that. That sounds no. No, it's a reference to Sandbox Capital.
Okay.
To say like, I didn't take money from you. Actually, like, I'm over here building my own place. So like, you missed out, kind of thing.
Mm.
I'm gonna build my own playground at Sandbox Playground, but also I'm gonna build my own playground is a callback to first verse. Are we the best? Motherfucker, we the only. And this is something that I'll talk about a lot with Startup Hype Man with the pitch stuff is when you are the only, you create the sandbox and you're alone in that sandbox and everyone else is forced to share a sandbox over there, but you're alone here building the castle. So that's like, it's a callback to verse 1, both in saying, are we the best, we the only, but also, right, in a sandbox, what do? Like you build your sand castle. But remember, we didn't talk about it in this episode, but like, if you're listening to the song, remember also in verse 1, towards the end of the first verse, there's this whole thing about like, what are the investors saying about you?
Pressure in my head, just go to try to get ahead of me and measure up my level. Is he really bred the pedigree to pedal in the pressure when the debt is up, especially impression? Will they crush him like a beetle? Should we let it be?
Will they crush him like a beetle? Should we let it be? Also, side note, Beatles, let it be. But then the next lyrics are,
Well, let us see when it's level, can they really float? And if we lay the drawbridge, will they build the moat? Ain't nobody getting in, is this a fucking joke? I'ma roll straight through them till they up in smoke.
so moat is something used in venture capital, meaning like, what is your mechanism of defense to make sure the competition can't do what you're doing? Like a moat around a castle.
Yeah, you're
And
competitive.
now in the end of the song, sorry, Sandbox, I'm gonna build my own playground. It's like, look, I'm building the fucking castle. And you were questioning if I had the moat. Yeah, come at me kind of thing.